Hi, everyone. This is Darcy Lemons with APQC. So delighted to have you all join us today. We are here to talk about fostering a KM culture. And actually what this is a sneak peek and intro to some of the speakers who will be featured in the Foster a KM Culture track at APQC's upcoming 2020 KM Conference scheduled for April 29th. 30th and May 1st. So we're delighted to have you all join us here today, and I'm going to intro our speakers in just a moment. First, let me give you do a little housekeeping and a little stage setting, and then we'll get right into the heart of the conversation. All right, let's see if I can navigate here, folks. Come on, computer. So while we're waiting for my computer to change screens, there we go. Okay. Just a few housekeeping items before we get into the meat of today's conversation. First of all, I want to invite you all to, if you'd like, to tweet about today's webinar using the hashtag KMAPQC. Second, all attendee lines are currently in listen-only mode. However, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. You can use the raise your hand button to ask a question, or you can type your question into the Q&A window. I believe that's on the right of your screen, and we will respond to your questions later on in the call. We do only have 30 minutes for the session today, but we will do our best to try to get to some of the audience questions that have come through before the end of the session. All right, let's get started. Okay, again with the technology here. Okay, while we're waiting, again, so if you're at all familiar with APQC, then you know that we love our surveys. And one of the things that we like to do is we periodically like to collect some data on trends and priorities in knowledge management. And so the data that you're seeing on the slide in front of you is from our 2019 survey on KM priorities. And if you wonder why I'm showing this to you today, well, if you look at the third and fourth bullets on this slide, so the one where it says 28% of participants responded that a priority is enabling sharing and collaboration within and across teams and units. And then the next one down where it says 25% of participants in the survey prioritizing increasing participation and engagement in KM. So these, for me, both really tie into change management, which ties into the culture of our organizations. And what the data here tells me is that, based on the survey, even though it was from 2019, is that a lot of organizations still struggle to get employees involved and doing KM, whatever that may look like in your organizations. And so many organizations, what that means then is that there's still something in the culture of the organization that perhaps is providing a barrier or in some way, shape, or form inhibiting knowledge sharing and collaboration within those organizations. And goodness knows culture. And culture, what's the old saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast, something like that. Well, just let me give a little bit of context by what we mean by culture here, and that is that culture encompasses things like behaviors, working norms, and unwritten rules about how things work or how we get things done in our company, and processes that shape situational context. In large organizations, cultural nuances may vary across our locations, across business units, across functions, and even teams. And some of our cultural barriers are social. In other words, there is inconsistency in the values and priorities across the cultural groups. Sometimes our cultural barriers are individual. In other words, employees may struggle to integrate their knowledge with that of the organization. And so what are some practical steps that you might be able to take to nudge your culture in the right direction? I mean, let's face it, we're not going to start off by saying, hey, we're from KM and we're here to shape the culture of the organization. Generally, cultural change happens through influence from within, or nudges, if you will. And in the track Foster KM Culture at our 2020 KM conference, you'll hear how some leading organizations have made their workforces more receptive to collaboration and reuse in the midst of things like mergers, market acquisitions, and disruptions, and rapid change. Topics in that track will include things like, how do we build KM into the mission, vision, and strategy of the organization? KM marketing and branding, and connecting KM to performance and promotability, and the role of communities in organizational culture. All of these things represent how the organizations who will be represented in that track have nudged their culture to become more accepting of knowledge management or knowledge sharing and collaboration. So what I'd like to do now is introduce you to some of the people who will be presenting at APQC's 2020 conference, and then we will segue from that into a series of questions that I've prepared for our speakers, and we'll get to them as many as possible. So let me introduce today's featured speakers. So from left to right, we have Lisa Austin with Toyota Motors North America, and the title of her track at the conference will be How Toyota Ensures Business Continuity During Transition and Transformation. We also have Alan Bolter from Schlumberger joining us today. The title of his track is Expanding KM Awareness and Engagement Through Branding and Marketing. And then finally, we have Alistair Field and Alan Growe, who are co-presenting at the conference in May, and their title is Managing KM Change Amidst Failure and Chaos. So we have the A group, Austin, Alan, and Alistair. Lisa, thank you for having a first name that starts with something other than A, because otherwise I feel like I was in the middle of a Dr. Seuss book or something like that. So what I'd like to do is we're going to start off, and I'm going to go, if you look, you still see the speaker screen, I'm going to go from left to right on this first question with the and then we'll change it up a little bit from there. So Lisa, starting with you, tell us a little bit about one strategic or tactical step that was a game changer for you all that really helped you build that knowledge sharing culture within Toyota.
Well, at Toyota, it's kind of unique because my answer would be I didn't have to. So at Toyota, continuous improvement is one of our pillars that we're built on, continuous improvement and respect for people. So the mindset of working together and knowing that people need to connect and share their information. Coming in, so I joined Toyota 3.5 years ago. Coming in from a KM perspective, that part of the culture was already there. It was just sitting, waiting to be capitalized on from a knowledge management perspective. I would say what they did not really have was a mindset of how they needed to plan for business continuity and making information available across the board so that as we moved from California to Texas and merged two large organizations from California and Kentucky, actually, to Texas, it was really important to explain to people how critical it was to document what we were doing. And, you know, most people say, oh, but KM's not about documents, but in our case, it actually was. How did we make explicit our tribal knowledge? And so working on that was what we've been doing over the past few years.
Great, thank you very much, Lisa. And I know that there's a deeper story behind that. So if we have time, I'll come back to you on that. So Alan Bolter, same question for you and Schlumberger. What has been a particular strategic or tactical step that was critical to helping Schlumberger with its rich 20+ year history in knowledge management?
Yeah.
But you may not have, the company may not have started that way in terms of having a mindset for knowledge sharing and collaboration. So what, either something from the past that you can share with us or something y'all have done recently that has enabled the sustainment of that culture?
Thanks very much, Darcy. Well, I guess I'll talk a bit later maybe about some of the sustaining side, but I'll talk about some of the triggers and things that made it happen, I guess, right at the beginning. And particularly with our communities, it's about, and I remember this quote actually going back to the person who created our communities, and I can't take the full credit, I wasn't in the role at the time, but it's about handing back the power of these communities to the people. That's exactly what he used to say. So whilst our communities of practice have got a very strong foundation and they've got sponsorship and leadership and things like that, it's really powerful that we've sort of given the control back to the leaders and back to the members, and they drive the activity, they feel the ownership. And I think that's something that we've always tried to strive for as a strategy, and we've maintained it for, as you say, 22 years or so. So as an example, all of our communities have elected leaders, so they're not given the role, they're elected by the membership, which we think is a very powerful thing. So in fact, just last year we had a record number of people standing in the elections to be leaders for our annual cycle. So I think that's one quick one to share with you, is about giving the power back to the people, so to speak. And the other way is also to make sure that tactically we are aligning with lots of the key business initiatives. And we've set up a lot of communities over the years aligned with our own key business objectives. For example, we've got a new one started a couple of years ago on global sustainability. So you can see how we're partnering with the bigger goals there, and that's helped us along the way a lot.
Yes, I can only imagine. I love that the power, giving the power back to the people, letting them kind of drive their communities with maybe some gentle guidance along the way. Just to assume they don't take too sharp of a left turn or something like that, right?
Exactly, yes.
And then aligning with the two great factors. So thank you very much, Alan. All right, so Alan Grohe and Alistair Field, coming to you all. Same question. What is something that you all have done for Ruckus in terms of helping to build that knowledge sharing culture?
So Alistair, you want me to take this one, I assume?
Go ahead.
So at Ruckus, our program is not as mature as those at Toyota or Schlumberger. It began about 7 years ago or so. And we've been focused primarily in a customer support use case for knowledge management. So we deliver content for internal use by our support engineers, and then also publish it out to our support portal for our customers to be able to use, with the goal of helping them to solve problems with our products on their own and also more quickly. So our goals have primarily been grounded in some of those traditional customer support metrics. And then we've done a lot of partnering with our executive team and IT teams for managing the various pieces of the technology implementation and working through how to ground our KM program in our day-to-day work. What we've kind of called building the habit among ourselves and on the internal side, and growing that over time. So that's where we've really been trying to focus the adoption and knowledge sharing efforts. Darcy.
Great, thank you. Building the habit, and that's exactly what so many of our organizations we have to do with individuals is help them develop those good habits. So and there's different ways to go about doing that. So hopefully we'll have some time, Alan, and maybe come back to you and ask you a little bit more about that. In the meantime, I want to move on to our second question, excuse me, which is all about challenges and what challenges you've faced while nurturing that knowledge sharing culture. So this time I'm going to start with Alan at Schlumberger. What was the biggest challenge you faced or have faced while nurturing that wonderful culture at Schlumberger?
So I'll give you one challenge, and of course we've had many, as I'm sure we all have. And I think the challenge that we have, which is probably not unique to every organization, is the scale, the size of the organization. So we've had more than 100,000 people for quite a number of years now. And it's very tempting to try and solve everything at once and satisfy everything with one kind of system and platform and things like that. And we've chosen really over the years not to try and go down that path, or maybe we've chosen a different path at least. So there are lots of knowledge management needs around communities, around vetted best practices and things like that. They don't all have to sit in the same platform and the same piece of software. That's our challenge and lesson, or perhaps that we've learned over the time as well. So it's the scale of the organization, and just use the tools that are fit for purpose for their specific job. There's no single tool on this planet that will do them all, so don't try and do that. Just use the ones that work for you best. And I think that's probably been a challenge, but also a lesson learned that we've had.
Great, great. Okay, thanks, Alan. So Alan G and Alistair, coming over to you all. Same question. What's one of the biggest challenges that you all have faced while nurturing the culture there?
So one of the really big challenges has been around providing access for our engineers across all of our various content repositories that they use day to day. So this is a little bit more of a technology piece of that, and that's where we brought and partnered in with Coveo to kind of help pull all of that content into a single search result set for our engineers. We're indexing about 12 content sources internally, and for our customers, which we just went live with on Monday, we're providing 6. So that helps them find their answers more quickly and be able to, access all the content that could be of use to them.
Absolutely. So that sounds, yes, I'm sure that was a huge challenge. And congratulations on the launch on Monday. I'm sure that was a great feeling to have that you hit that milestone.
It's been fun.
Lisa, so your turn. Tell us about one of the biggest challenges that you all faced with regard to the culture there at Toyota.
So I think what has happened over the past 3 years or so, when we were in the middle of the move, there was the burning platform that convinced people, yeah, we need to document things. We need to get everything in one place kind of situation. And then once everybody could breathe, after everybody was moved, all of a sudden now we're continuing to work against complacency. So I think our biggest challenge right now is complacency, and the fact that no longer is everybody worried about business continuity, or it's not number one on their list, right, for business continuity. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're settled in, they're getting comfortable,
Right.
The dust has settled, all of that, and so now you're like, oh, but wait.
Yeah.
Just that doesn't mean that we can forget
Right.
that we have this critical knowledge, and it's important that we treat it as such. Yes.
Exactly.
We want to continue with the good habits and not fall back on bad habits. So, all right. So the third question I have for you all is that, what have been some of the characteristics that helped you know that these actions that you've taken or challenges that you've addressed, what are some of the things that helped you recognize, oh, we've been successful, we hit a milestone or a tipping point in the way people and our organization think about knowledge sharing and collaboration. What helped you recognize that? So, and this time around, I'd like to start with Alan Groy and Alistair. I know this is, you know, a younger, as you said, a younger program here. So what are some of the things that have helped you realize that you hit that tipping point?
So I think some of the metrics and analytics that we use around our adoption are a good way to help be able to tell when we're making progress. I wouldn't say we've really been successful yet, but our goal really is to make progress on things so far. Alistair, do you kind of want to talk a little to some of the metrics that we're seeing through Coveo, for example?
Sure. So from the Coveo side, so as Alan expressed, you know, we've unified all the content, and as users are searching, we're able to find out, you know, what documents they're consuming, what documents are useful in terms of a click. They search, they click on a piece of content. We can really see that activity in a positive light. We can see where gaps occur. So when people are searching, when we're getting 0 content returns, not only is that a bad user experience, it means they haven't found their piece of knowledge, and therefore they go away a bit dissatisfied. So we can definitely dig into these metrics for the adoption on user or agent side. And both Alan and I come from a service background, as he's already mentioned. I have a support engineer background and now work with customers like Alan and other clients for exposing that content in a knowledge management scenario around the search activity. And so we can very much get a lot of data in terms of what people are finding, how are their journeys, and that helps. So we work with AI and ML to then start promoting relevant content. So as people are searching, we're learning what they want to know. We're learning what it is they then go on to do, and therefore promoting that content, much like the YouTube or Netflix hole you go down. You start on one piece and you go to the next and to the next and to the next. We're helping those users realize what they need to know next by providing them suggested content based on habits of that search environment.
Yeah, and even unsuccessful transactions are useful for us to be able to examine, because that helps us identify where we might not have content at all and it needs to be prioritized, as well as in some places where we might need to boost the findability of content that does exist.
Great. Thanks, guys. Great. And I love that. Yes, it's so easy to fall down the reference to the Netflix hole.
I like it.
Oh, I get myself back out again. Lisa, coming to you, you know, what would you say what has helped you all realize, whether it was during the move or since then, that what are some of the things that have helped you realize, you know, you've hit a tipping point or that you've had some success with regard to the culture you're trying to build at Toyota?
Well, I'll tell you, I think the number one thing was the engagement by our top executive leadership, and their being willing to be videotaped touting our program. So you've always heard, you know, having executive sponsorship is critical with with any program, whether it's KM or otherwise. And I think that is what was a very good indication that while they may not get it in terms of the details side of knowledge management, but culturally it was recognized as, yeah, this is good. We need to get everybody to realize this is what they need to be doing.
That's awesome. That is so awesome that you were able to do that.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure there'll be some questions about that. Everything from, did you have to script it for them to?
Yes, of course.
How many of them? So excellent. So Alan Bolter, same question for you for Schlumberger. You know, what were some of the indicators that you'd had some success along the way?
So thanks. I think interesting, kind of building a little bit on what Lisa was saying there. Something that is really powerful for us is that when there are things like mergers and acquisitions that you mentioned at the beginning of the call, Darcy, as well, one of the first port of call that people come to is KM. So the people in charge of that, the business leaders in charge of it, they go, okay, we've now got to put together these two organizations. How are we going to do it? Well, of course, there's all of the normal stuff we have to go through, the financial and the HR and stuff like that. But how do you get two cultures to meld together? and let's say two sets of engineers who'd never worked together, so they get them to meld together, and they come straight to KM. And they say, oh, we need to set up a new community for our welding engineers or something like this. And so that's a simple but very powerful indicator that we're successful, because they keep coming and asking us to set things up because they know it works.
Right, right. Exactly. You're getting pulled. You're not having to just push stuff out to them. You're getting that pull. They're knocking on your door.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're knocking on our door, and that's a nice problem to have.
Right, right. Great. Okay. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so any questions from the participants at this point,
No.
Zakia?
No, I
Okay.
think we're just gonna keep going with what we have.
All right. Okay. So, yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I want to come back to was something that Alan Grohe, you mentioned a phrase that you used, which was, building the habits, right? There's certain desired behaviors and things like that that we want to see represented as people get engaged and start doing a better job, whether it's documenting their knowledge or creating and contributing new knowledge, sharing what we have. So let's see, I'll start with you, Alan, and then I'd like to quickly go from you to Lisa and Alan B. What is each of your organizations from that perspective? What has each done, something y'all done to help build those habits?
So we've been
Starting
able
with you, Alan.
Yeah, we've been able to, as of last year, and then we just went through the process again this quarter, establish HR-driven comp goals around knowledge management. They haven't necessarily bloomed in the way that we would like them to. We're pivoting and kind of adjusting this year based on how they went last year. That was the first year we had done it. And so we're shifting the goals this year in order to be able to sort of address some of the things we saw as gaps in how they worked out last year. That's been a very important tool, I think, for being able to show the importance of the program to the organization as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Right. Lisa, from your perspective, maybe you can, I don't know, building the habits, and how do you use that to fight against that complacency that you mentioned earlier?
Well, I think what we primarily do is make sure we are first engaging at that middle manager level. That seems to be giving us the most success in their buying into identifying a knowledge management lead in whatever that means to that particular department, and identifying content managers and the people that are the SMEs. Having that structure. Our most successful departments are those that really rely on SMEs within their organization to define what the operating procedures are and how work gets done within that organization. At Toyota, process is really, really important. So we're able to engage and capitalize on that.
Right. So you're really looking at how do we bring it into their environment, their workflows even.
Exactly.
That's excellent. Excellent. All right, Alan Bolter,
Yeah.
what does that mean? Building good habits. What does that mean for you all at Schlumberger?
So very good question, and I applaud what Lisa was saying about targeting the middle managers, because they are a critical group to make sure that you have success on that. I would actually kind of return back to what Alan was saying about the reward and recognition. So that's something that's been very important here at Schlumberger for 15 plus years or so, in that we have career ladders for our technical population where knowledge sharing is a fundamental part of it. So in order for them to progress in their technical capabilities, they need to have demonstrated knowledge sharing. It's not the only thing. They don't just have to share knowledge and they get promotion. It doesn't work like that, but it's one of the factors that goes into it, and that's been very successful. It's the kind of carrot that helps pull people forward and encourages them to be proactive in sharing their knowledge.
Great, great. Thank you, Alan. And yes, and it's a hallmark. Excuse me, you. I'm so excited. I just got all choked up. No, but it is a hallmark, right? The things that you all were talking about, the analytics and the metrics, the building it into performance plans and goals, the recognition for this, and really understanding how people work and what their day-to-day work lives and workflows are like. Those are all hallmarks of how you can successfully begin to nudge our cultures in the direction that we really want them to go. So I'm getting the signal that we're at our 30-minute mark now. I want to thank our guest speakers, Lisa Austin from Toyota, Alan Bolter with Schlumberger, Alan Growe and Alistair Field from Ruckus and Coveo. Thank you all very much for contributing and giving us sneak peeks around what you all have done to build and foster knowledge sharing cultures at your respective organizations. And for those of you in the audience out there, we look forward to seeing you all at our KM conference on April 29th, 30th, and May 1st, where you'll have lots of opportunity to interact with these speakers and plenty of others while you're there. So we hope to see you all in Houston soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, Darcy.
Bye, thanks.